Be me Kenneth 32. My life is my work, and I mean that in the best way possible. I own a shop that restores classic cars. It's not one of those sterile white floor garages you see on TV with a dozen guys in matching jumpsuits. This place has history. You can feel it in the air. My grandfather started it after he came back from the war with nothing but a set of wrenches and a belief that a thing of beauty should last forever. The main building is old brick, with huge timber beams overhead that have been stained dark from decades of exhaust and oil. The smell is a mix of gasoline, metal polish, old leather, and hard work. For me, it's the smell of home. I inherited the place about 5 years ago. It was my grandfather's, then my dad's, and now it's mine. I take forgotten, rusted-out shells of what were once glorious machines, and I bring them back to life. It's slow, painstaking work. Every nut, every bolt, every stitch in the upholstery has to be right. It's more art than mechanics. Business is good. There's a long waiting list. People with money who appreciate real craftsmanship. I don't advertise. It's all word of mouth. My reputation is everything. My life was simple: work, eat, sleep. Go for a long drive on the weekends and whatever classic I'd just finished. It was a good life, a quiet life. Then I met Joan. It was a couple of years back. I was at a gallery opening, not my usual scene at all. A client of mine, a guy whose 1960s Mercedes I restored, had invited me. He was one of the patrons. I was standing in the corner, feeling out of place in a clean shirt, trying not to get any of the weird-looking appetizers on myself. She walked right up to me. She was stunning, confident, sharp, with a smile that could disarm a bomb. I remember thinking she must have mistaken me for someone else. But she said she knew who I was. The client had pointed me out. She told me she worked in social marketing, helping brands build a progressive and authentic identity. I just nodded along, not really getting half of what she was saying, but she was fascinated by my work. She didn't call me a mechanic or a grease monkey. She called me an artisan. She said what I did was preserving history and a form of tangible art. It was nice. I wasn't used to that. Most women I'd met saw my job as a bit dirty, a bit lowbrow. Joan saw it as something noble. Or, at least, she said she did. We talked for over an hour. It was easy. She laughed at my dumb jokes. I got her number. I didn't think she'd actually answer if I called, but she did. Our first date was at some fancy restaurant I couldn't pronounce the name of. I was nervous as hell, but she put me at ease. She asked me a million questions about the shop, about my grandfather, about the cars. She seemed genuinely interested. She said she was tired of men who worked in finance or tech, men who were abstracted from reality. She loved that I worked with my hands, that I created something real. I was completely hooked. The next 2 years were pretty much a blur of happiness. We were inseparable. She'd come by the shop sometimes, usually on a weekend afternoon. She'd bring coffee and watch me work from a safe distance, careful not to get her expensive clothes dirty. I introduced her to the soul of my world, the growl of a V8 engine coming to life for the first time in 30 years, the satisfaction of a perfect coat of paint. She seemed to get it. She'd post pictures on her social media. Me covered in grease with some caption about authentic masculinity or the dignity of labor. Her friends and followers loved it. I was her rugged, salt-of-the-earth boyfriend, her personal artisan. It felt a little weird, like I was a character in her online story, but I was in love, so I didn't think too much about it. I figured that was just her world. She was smart, ambitious, and passionate about her causes. A lot of what she talked about went over my head. Things like systemic structures, the patriarchy, emotional labor. To me, things were simpler. You work hard. You treat people with respect. You keep your word. But I listened. I wanted to understand her world, just like she seemed to want to understand mine. I loved her. I really did. I thought we were building a life together. About 6 or 7 months ago, I decided to propose. I had a ring made. It wasn't some giant rock. It was a simple, elegant vintage design that I knew she'd like. I didn't do a big public proposal. That wasn't my style. We were up at a small cabin by a lake for the weekend, just the two of us. We built a fire. We talked for hours. I told her I couldn't imagine my life without her. I asked her to be my wife. She cried. She said yes. It was the happiest moment of my life. We got back and she announced it to the world. A perfect picture of the ring on her finger, with a long caption about committing to a conscious partnership. The wedding planning started almost immediately, and that's when the first little cracks started to show. Everything had to be a statement. The venue couldn't just be a nice place, it had to be ethically sourced and woman-owned. The invitations had to be on recycled paper, printed with soy ink by a company that donated a portion of its profits to a women's shelter. Every decision was filtered through her ideological lens. I went along with it. I just wanted her to be happy. The costs were piling up, way more than I expected, but she kept saying it was an investment in our story. Then came the dinner. Joan wanted me to meet some of her closest friends, her inner circle, as she called them. It was at one of those places where the food is tiny and the bill is huge. I had just finished a long day at the shop. I was working on a beautiful but frustratingly complex Porsche 356. The wiring was a nightmare. I got home just in time to shower and change. Joan was already dressed, looking incredible as always. She watched me as I was trying to scrub the grease from under my fingernails. She had this strange look on her face. A little bit of pity, a little bit of disappointment. She told me, "Kenneth, sweetie, could you try a little harder with your hands? We're going to be around people who notice these things." It stung. My hands are my life. They're my grandfather's hands. They build things. But I just nodded and kept scrubbing. The dinner was an experience. Her friends were all like her. Smart, articulate, and very, very sure of their opinions. They all worked in similar fields: marketing, HR, nonprofit management. I was the only one at the table who had ever gotten calluses on their hands. I was introduced as Joan's artisan fiance. The conversation was like a foreign language. They were talking about microaggressions, problematic narratives, and toxic masculinity. At one point, one of her friends looked at me with a sympathetic smile and said it was so refreshing that Joan was with someone so uncomplicated. I didn't know if it was a compliment or an insult. I just ate my steak and kept my mouth shut. They started talking about marriage. It wasn't the romantic, till death do us part kind of talk. It was a strategic discussion. They talked about protecting their assets, maintaining their independence, and having an exit strategy. One of them laughed about how her ex-husband thought marriage was a partnership, but he didn't realize that in today's world, it's a high-risk investment for women. Joan was nodding along, adding her own points about how the institution of marriage was designed to benefit men. I felt a cold knot in my stomach. Is that what she thought? That she was making a high-risk investment in me? I looked at her across the table, laughing with her friends, and for the first time she looked like a stranger. On the way home, I was quiet. Joan noticed. She asked me what was wrong. I tried to explain how the conversation made me feel. Uncomfortable, like I was being analyzed, not accepted. She immediately got defensive. She said I was being too sensitive, that I wasn't used to being around women who speak their minds. She told me her friends were just looking out for her, and that their concerns were valid because the system is rigged against women. She accused me of having unexamined male privilege, because I'd never had to think about these things. I dropped it. It was easier than fighting, but that night, the seed of doubt was planted. A few weeks went by. The wedding planning continued. The dinner was forgotten, or at least never mentioned again. Things seemed to go back to normal. Then one night, we were sitting on the couch watching a movie. She paused it, turned to me with a serious expression. "Ken, we need to talk about something important," she said. I thought it was about the caterer or the flower arrangements. "I think we should get a prenup." My heart sank a little. After that dinner, the word prenup sounded like an alarm bell. I tried to keep my voice even. "Oh? Why's that?" She launched into a perfectly rehearsed speech. "It wasn't about money," she said. "It was about principle. It was a feminist act." She explained that traditional marriage vows were outdated because they were created in a time when women were property. A modern marriage, a conscious partnership, needed a modern contract that defined the terms of the relationship. It was about setting clear boundaries and expectations from the start. It wasn't about a lack of trust, she insisted. It was the ultimate act of trust. It was showing that our love wasn't based on financial dependency. She said it would protect both of us. It would allow us to enter the marriage as true equals. It was a brilliant pitch. She made it sound like the most logical, progressive, and romantic thing in the world. Part of me, the part that remembered that dinner with her friends, was screaming no. But another part of me, the part that loved her and wanted to trust her, felt ashamed of my own hesitation. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was old-fashioned. Maybe this is what modern love looked like. I looked into her eyes. She seemed so sincere, so passionate about it. "Okay," I said. "If it's that important to you, then okay, we can do it." Her face lit up. She kissed me and told me I was the most understanding man in the world. She said her lawyer would draft something up and send it over. A weight settled in my gut. Her lawyer. Not our lawyer. Her lawyer. I told myself I was overthinking it. I loved this woman. I was going to spend my life with her. A piece of paper couldn't change that. I was so wrong. The email arrived about a week later. The subject line was bland and professional. Draft premarital agreement. It was from a law firm I'd never heard of, her lawyer. I remember it was a Thursday evening. I was at the shop late, trying to solve that wiring problem with the Porsche. I had grease on my hands, and my back was aching. I saw the email on my phone and decided to open it on the office computer. The office is a small, cluttered room at the back of the garage. It's filled with old service manuals, stacks of invoices, and a black and white photo of my grandpa standing proudly in front of the shop in 1952. It's my sanctuary, my place of focus. I clicked open the attachment, a 30-page PDF document loaded onto the screen. My first thought was, 30 pages? What on earth needs to be said in 30 pages? I started to read. The first few pages were standard legal jargon, names, dates, definitions. I scrolled past it, looking for the meat of the agreement. Then I found it. The sections on separate property and marital property. My blood started to run cold. The first section detailed Joan's assets. Everything she owned now, her savings, her investments, her car, even her furniture, was listed as her sole and separate property. It stated that anything she acquired during the marriage, from any source, including her salary, bonuses, or inheritances, would also remain her sole and separate property. Okay, I thought. That seems fair enough. What's hers is hers. Then I got to the section about my assets. It started the same way. The shop, the property it was on, my savings, my own classic car collection, all listed as my separate property. But then there was a subsection, a very carefully worded subsection. It talked about the appreciation of value. It stated that any increase in the value of my business from the date of marriage onward would be considered marital property. I reread it, and then I reread it again. They weren't just talking about profits. They were talking about the total market value of the company itself, the family business, the legacy my grandfather built. My mind started racing. I'd been growing the business steadily. The reputation of the shop was better than ever. The value was definitely increasing. So, if we ever divorced, she would have a claim to a huge chunk of my life's work and my family's work. I felt a knot tighten in my chest. This wasn't feeling like an agreement between equals. I kept reading. It got worse, much worse. There was a section on gifts. Any gift I gave to her, no matter how valuable, would immediately become her separate property with no strings attached. Any gift she gave to me would be considered marital property. It was so lopsided, it was almost comical. But I wasn't laughing. I felt sick. I scrolled down further, past more dense legal text, and then I found the paragraph that stopped my heart. It was titled Spousal Support. This was the part that laid out the terms for alimony. The language was clinical, but the meaning was brutal. In the event of a divorce for any reason, I would be required to pay Joan's spousal support. The amount was set at 30% of my gross annual income. The duration was set at 1 year of payments for every 2 years of marriage, with a minimum of 5 years and a maximum of 10. I did the math in my head. It was a staggering amount of money. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was a single, devastating sentence. It said that her right to this support would not be affected by any marital misconduct, including infidelity. I sat back in my creaky office chair and stared at the screen. Let me get this straight. She could cheat on me, leave me, and I would still be legally obligated to hand over nearly a third of my income to her for the next decade. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. And then, as if to add insult to injury, there was a clause right after it. A justification. I'll never forget the wording. It said this support was to compensate for the non-economic contributions made to the marriage, including emotional labor, and to acknowledge the systemic societal disadvantages faced in the professional marketplace. Emotional labor, systemic disadvantages. It was the language from the dinner party, the language from her social media posts. It was her ideology, weaponized and written into a legal document designed to gut me. This wasn't a prenup. This was a corporate takeover plan. I closed the file. I couldn't look at it anymore. I turned off the computer and just sat there in the dark office, the silence of the shop pressing in on me. The smell of oil and steel suddenly felt foreign. The photo of my grandfather on the wall seemed to be staring at me, his expression disappointed. I felt like a fool, a complete and utter fool. I had been so wrapped up in the idea of being in love that I had ignored every red flag. The way she talked about my work as a brand, the way her friends looked at marriage like a business deal, her constant talk about protecting herself. I saw it all with sickening clarity. She wasn't looking for a partner. She was looking for an asset, an authentic one that would look good on her arm and even better on her balance sheet if things went south. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in the office, thinking. By morning, the shock had worn off and been replaced by a cold, hard anger. But I knew I couldn't just fly off the handle. I had to be smart. I had to be sure. I looked up my family's lawyer, an old guy who had handled my grandfather's will and my father's estate. He was semi-retired, but he agreed to see me. His office was the opposite of Joan's lawyer's firm. It was in an old building, with wood-paneled walls and shelves overflowing with dusty law books. He was a short, bald man with thick glasses and a quiet, no-nonsense demeanor. I didn't say much. I just handed him a printed copy of the agreement. He put on his reading glasses and started to go through it, page by page. He didn't rush. He read every line. For 20 minutes, the only sound in the room was the rustle of paper. He would occasionally make a little sound under his breath. When he finally finished, he took off his glasses and carefully placed them on his desk. He looked me straight in the eye. "Kenneth," he said, his voice completely flat. "I've been a lawyer for 45 years. I've seen a lot of things. I've seen greed. I've seen spite. I've seen people try to use the law to hurt each other." He paused, leaning forward. "But this is one of the most predatory documents I have ever read." The validation hit me like a physical wave. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't being overly sensitive. "This isn't an agreement," he continued. "This is an indemnity policy written in your fiance's favor. It removes all risk from her and places all of it squarely on you." He tapped the section on my business. "This clause here, it's designed to give her a stake in your family's legacy without her ever having to lift a finger. It treats your hard work and your inheritance as a mutual fund she gets to cash in on." Then he pointed to the spousal support section. "And this is the kill shot, the infidelity clause. It's morally bankrupt. It essentially gives her a license to do whatever she wants, with a golden parachute funded by you if you decide you can't live with it." He leaned back in his chair. "My advice as your lawyer is simple. Do not sign this, under any circumstances." Then he looked at me, not as a lawyer, but as an old family friend. "My advice as a man who knew your grandfather is run. This document tells you everything you need to know about the person you're about to marry. She doesn't see you as a future husband. She sees you as a business opportunity." I just sat there, nodding slowly. Hearing it from him, so plainly and without emotion, solidified everything. I thanked him for his time. He wouldn't let me pay him. He just shook my hand and wished me luck. I walked out of his office and into the bright afternoon sun. Everything looked different, sharper. The anger was gone. In its place was a strange sense of calm. I knew exactly what I had to do. There was no room for negotiation. There was no finding a middle ground. You can't compromise with a predator. You can't build a partnership based on a foundation of planned exploitation. The whole relationship, the last 2 years, replayed in my mind. But this time, I saw it through a new lens. Every compliment about my authenticity, every social media post about my real work. It wasn't admiration, it was marketing. She was building her brand, and I was the star product. I drove back to the shop, not to my house. I couldn't face her yet. I needed to be in my own space. I walked through the garage, past the half-finished cars. I ran my hand over the cool metal fender of the Porsche. This was real. My work was real. My legacy was real. And I was not going to let it be dismantled and sold for parts to fund someone's ideological fantasy of compensation. I planned the conversation in my head. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to accuse. I was just going to state the facts. I was going to show her the same respect she had failed to show me. The respect of being direct and honest. That evening, I went home. Joan was in the kitchen, humming to herself as she looked at wedding magazines. She looked up and smiled when I walked in. The same smile that had captivated me at the art gallery. Now, it just looked practiced. "Hey you," she said cheerfully. "You're home early? How was your day?" I took a deep breath. "We need to talk, Joan." I placed the printed copy of the Prenup on the kitchen island between us. Her smile faltered, just for a second. Then it was replaced by a look of guarded determination. The mask was coming off. She looked at the thick stack of paper on the counter, then back at me. Her cheerful demeanor vanished, replaced by a cool, almost clinical composure. It was like a switch had been flipped. "Okay," she said, her voice steady. "So you've read it. What are your thoughts?" She said it so casually, as if she were asking my opinion on a new brand of coffee. I looked her right in the eye. I wanted to see if there was any flicker of shame, any hint of doubt. There was nothing. Just a calm, expectant look. "My thoughts?" I repeated, keeping my own voice low and even. My thought is that this isn't a prenuptial agreement, Joan. This is a separation agreement. It's a document written for a marriage that's already failed. I slid the papers across the polished granite countertop until they were right in front of her. I'm not signing this. A flash of annoyance crossed her face, but she quickly suppressed it. She was still in control, still playing the role of the reasonable one. Kenneth, let's not be dramatic, she said, her tone becoming slightly condescending. This is standard practice for modern couples. It's about being smart and protecting ourselves. My lawyer assured me these are very common clauses. I almost laughed. Common clauses. Right. Common? I asked. Is it common to have a clause that gives you a claim to 50% of the growth of a family business you've contributed nothing to? A business my grandfather poured his blood and sweat into? Her eyes narrowed. I would be contributing. I'd be your wife. I'd be providing emotional support. That has value, Kenneth. It's called emotional labor. Maybe you should read up on it. There it was again. That phrase. The same one from the document. The one that turned love and support into a billable service. And the alimony? I pressed on, my voice still calm, but with a hard edge now. The clause that says I have to pay you 1/3 of my income for years, even if you cheat on me and end the marriage. Is that common too, Joan? Or is that what you call your exit strategy? Her composure finally cracked. Her face hardened, and the mask of the progressive, understanding partner fell away completely. What was underneath was cold and furious. You just don't get it, she hissed, her voice low and sharp. Of course that clause is in there. It's for my protection. The world is not a level playing field. The entire system is designed for men like you to succeed, while women are penalized for taking time to build a family or support a husband's career. I just stared at her, dumbfounded. What are you talking about? You have a great career. You make good money. You've never once sacrificed anything for my business. You barely even like coming to the shop unless you can take a picture for your social media. That's not the point, she shot back, her voice rising. It's about the principle. It's about rectifying a historical imbalance. I knew you wouldn't understand. You're too privileged to see it. All you see is your money and your precious business. You don't see me, the woman who's supposed to be your partner. You don't trust me. That was it. That was the line that broke something inside me. The accusation of distrust. Trust? I said. And this time I did laugh, a short, bitter sound. Joan, this document is the single greatest act of distrust I have ever witnessed. It's 30 pages of it. It presumes my failure, my betrayal, and my eventual exploitation. It's a business contract designed for a hostile takeover, not a marriage. I leaned forward, my hands flat on the counter. I was ready to give you my whole life, my name, my future. I trusted you completely. And while I was planning a life with you, you and your lawyer were planning for a life without me, funded by me. She saw she was losing the argument, so she switched tactics. The anger melted away and was replaced by tears. It was a masterful performance. Her eyes welled up, her lip quivered. "You're twisting my words," she whispered, her voice choked with manufactured emotion. "You're trying to make me sound like some kind of monster. I'm just scared, Ken. All my friends, they've seen what can happen. Marriages fall apart, men leave, and the woman is left with nothing. I need to know I'll be okay." For a split second, the old me, the me that loved her, felt a pang of sympathy. But then I looked down at the cold, calculating words on the paper. The clause about infidelity, the 50% claim on my family's legacy. This wasn't fear. This was an insurance policy against her own bad behavior. The calm I had felt earlier returned, stronger than ever. It was a clarity so profound it was almost peaceful. I knew this was the end, The real end. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the small velvet box that had once held all my hopes for the future. I hadn't planned to do this, not like this, but the moment was here. I opened it and took out the engagement ring. It was beautiful. It caught the light from the kitchen fixtures and sparkled. I held it between my thumb and forefinger. "You're right," I said quietly. "We do see marriage differently." Her crying stopped. She looked at the ring, then at my face, her eyes wide with confusion. She thought I was about to give in. "You see it as a risk that needs to be managed with contracts and clauses," I continued. "You see it as a system where you need to secure your compensation in advance, a business transaction." I placed the ring gently on top of the prenup. It sat there, glittering on the black and white text. I was looking for a wife, a partner to build a life with, through good times and bad. Someone to trust with my heart, not someone I need to protect my wallet from. The realization of what was happening finally dawned on her. The color drained from her face. The performance was over. "Kenneth, what are you doing?" she whispered, her voice trembling for real this time. "I'm making a choice," I said. "I'm choosing my self-respect. I'm choosing my family's legacy. And I'm choosing to not enter into a partnership with someone who sees me as her retirement plan." I pushed the ring and the prenup towards her side of the island. "The wedding is off, Joan. I'm calling everything off." The silence that followed was deafening. She just stared at the ring. She didn't move. She didn't speak. I think in her entire life, in her entire worldview, where she was always the one with the power and the leverage, she had never considered this outcome. She had pushed too far, so sure of her position, that she never imagined I would just walk away from the whole game. "You can't do this," she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. "Everything is booked. The deposits, my family, my friends. What am I supposed to tell them?" The narcissism of that question was breathtaking. Not, "I love you," not, "Let's fix this." Just, "What about my public image?" "You can tell them the truth," I said, turning to walk away. "Tell them you valued a contract more than a commitment. Tell them your feminist act of self-protection ended up costing you the very thing you claimed you wanted." I walked out of the kitchen. I went into our bedroom and packed a bag, just the essentials. She followed me, the shock now turning into frantic desperation. "Ken, wait. We can talk about this. We can change the contract. We can make it fair." I stopped at the bedroom door and looked at her. "It's too late for that, Joan. The contract already did its job. It showed me who you really are, and I can't unsee that. I can't build a marriage on that." And then I left. I walked out the front door of the house we had shared, and I didn't look back. The next few days were a logistical nightmare. I had to make the calls. To the venue, the caterer, the photographer. I lost thousands of dollars in non-refundable deposits. It hurt, but it felt like the cheapest price I could ever pay for freedom. I had to tell my family. They were shocked, then angry, then incredibly supportive when I explained the reason. My father just clapped me on the shoulder and said my grandfather would have been proud. That meant more to me than anything. Joan, from what I heard, did not take it well. Her initial reaction was to go on the offensive. She told her friends and family a heavily edited version of the story, that I was a controlling traditionalist who couldn't handle being with a strong, independent woman, that I had freaked out over a simple legal document. For a while, some people believed her. I got a few angry texts from her friends calling me a misogynist. I just blocked them. But the truth has a way of coming out. She made the mistake of showing the prenup to one of her more level-headed cousins, trying to prove how unreasonable I was. The cousin, apparently, read the infidelity clause and told Joan she was insane and that I had dodged a cannonball, not just a bullet. The story started to spread, the real story. The narrative she had so carefully crafted of her as the progressive victim of my backwards masculinity fell apart. People started to see the prenup for what it was, a blatant, greedy overreach. Her public humiliation was, from what I gathered, profound. She had positioned herself as an expert in modern relationships, and her own had imploded because of her own cynical greed. It was a delicious irony. She tried to contact me a few more times. First angry emails, then tearful voicemails, then messages trying to appeal to the good times we had. I never responded. There was nothing left to say. A few months have passed since then. I moved out of the house and got my own place, a small apartment closer to the shop. Life is simple again. Work, eat, sleep. The Porsche 356, the one that was giving me so much trouble, is finished now. I took it out for a drive last weekend up the coast. The engine ran perfectly. The sun was shining. The ocean was on my left. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. I felt free, truly free. I lost a fiance and a whole lot of money, but I saved myself. I saved my future. I saved my grandfather's legacy. Sometimes I'm in the shop late at night, the smell of oil and metal in the air, and I look at that old black and white photo on the wall, and I feel like my grandfather is looking back at me, nodding in approval. I built something real, and I refuse to let it be torn down, and that's a better feeling than any false sense of love could ever be. I'm okay. More than okay. I'm back to being me.